Hey everybody, it's Charles, your hobby hero, and today we're going to be talking about CGC and their policy on purple restored label books. Before we get started, if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button. I do appreciate it. I do put out regular content about the hobbies that I love the most. Now, if you are into comic pressing and cleaning yourselves, or you just pay attention to what's been happening in the comic and pressing communities, there has been a significant increase recently in the number of purple labels, or restored, if you're not familiar, labels coming out of CGC. A lot of those involved around the processes that I highlight here on the channel that are revolved around cleaning and stain removal of those individual books. Now, in some instances, these processes are absolutely abused, taking books to an unnatural state to where either they have damaged the books or have just taken them to where they don't look natural anymore. But what we're starting to see is a significant increase in the number of books that are coming back that still have natural looks to them. Definitely were done by people that I understand, know that they understand rather the methods that they're using. Looks very natural, and they're still coming back with these purple labels. So we want to jump into it, why it's happening, what CGC is looking for, and why ultimately I think CGC really needs to change their stance on this particular issue. Now, before we get started, and you may have already typed out your response, I know there's going to be a lot of people that are down there talking about how this is absolutely restoration and needs to be documented on every single book that's going down there, and you can always make an argument for it. On restoration, just about anything you could possibly do to a comic book is technically restoration. Comic book pressing is restoration. If you drop something on your comic book and then wipe it off, that is technically restoration because something has happened to change its original state and you are doing something to restore it to its original state. So I don't want to get into the semantics here. Yes, I know by the definition of the word restoration it's there, but we also understand that there are certain things that us as collectors don't consider to be restoration. We've seen CGC adopt those time and time again over the years, and we're going to kind of dive into some of those issues as well. So first and foremost is, what does CGC consider to be a restored book? So take a look at what they have on their website here. The things they look for on a restored book: color touch, piece fill, tear seals, spine split seals, reinforcement, piece reattachment, cleaning, which is what we're going to be talking about for the most part today, staple replacement or cleaning, and then reglossing, glue, or trimming of the book. Now, one thing a lot of these have in common that I will agree with is when things are added to the book that aren't naturally present on the book. You see a lot of that with the older books where the paper has just fallen apart and needs some support to even stay together as a functioning book. And I understand having that kind of stuff diagnosed. Color touch, the same. People are adding color to a book to make it appear as though color has not been lost, to either to damage, to a tear, to a bend, and to conceal flaws that are in that book, which is going to be a little bit different from the cleaning aspect, which is what we're going to be talking about today. Now, if you're asking yourself, hey, with these things that are being cleaned, how do they even know? Well, a lot of that has changed here recently. Previously, if you've watched the channel a lot, there really wasn't very many of these books that were being cleaned that were coming back detected, minus the ones that were basically being overdone. We've talked about that on our channel, so I won't dive too far into it. But what has happened now is CGC has found that some of these cleaning procedures can leave tells, such as page cockling. Sometimes the pages will shrink just enough to where there's a slight wave to the pages. There's some crinkling that can happen. It can cause staples to oxidize faster. If people are taking staples out of the book to clean the cover separately from the rest of the book and reattaching the staples. These are all things that CGC is looking for. The problem is these things are not exclusive to cleaning. There are people who will just take the staples out so that they can get a really good press on the book. There are people who will take the staples out so that they can clean the staples, which again is something that CGC considers restoration. Moisture gets on the books from a variety of different reasons. So if you have found old collections, some of them were stored outside in barns, they've had liquids on them, they've had all kinds of stuff happen to these books. Those could be symptoms of those conditions, not of a cleaning or restorative effort to the book. So that's one problem I have with using these metrics that they're using to decide what they consider to be cleaning. Is it's not 100% foolproof, because the same indications that they're looking for that could be there as a result from almost any other kind of contact with a solution of any sort. Could you spill your coffee on it and you didn't clean it up fast enough? That's not restorative work. And I don't think anybody out there is going to tell you that it is. The other problem is it allows a lot of it to go to the individual grader. Now, I know we've all had our issues with what makes a 9.8 versus a 9.6, and we're always talking about how the grader can be what decides that fine detail there. Can be a bigger disparity, but at the end of the day, usually not a huge difference in the overall value of the book. And again, you can get down to the semantics and talk about how there could be some big issues there, but the difference between a purple label on a book and a universal blue label on a book is a much larger gap for most people. For most people, if it is a purple label, they're looking at almost a 50% decrease in the book at the exact same grade just because it has that purple label on it. And when you're talking about leaving it up to the grader to decide, hey, I think these pages are too white for this grade of book, for this age of book, so I think it's restored, and I have no way to prove it other than my speculation, is a problem for me. Whenever an individual has that much control over the value of a book, it becomes a problem for the secondary market when that is where that is concerned. And let's take a look at some of the stuff that still falls into their restored grading scale, so that it basically, in my opinion, is a 100% catch-all. If they just decide that they want to do it, they can do it. So we're going to go to their grading quality scale, and we're going to ignore the C and the P, or C and the B rather, entirely, and just look at what symptoms, are still considered restored by their scale under the A category under excellence. So materials used: rice paper, wheat paper, acrylic, or waterproof paint for leaf casting. So they're going to notice that additive there. Color touch match is nearly perfect, no bleed through. So a good color touch job, again, 100% should still be restored. Piece feel, seamless and correct thickness. So you've added something to the book again, and it was done well. Absolutely restored. Here's where it starts to trip you up here. So if your book has no fading, it has no excessive waviness, no ripples, no cockling, or ink smudges from cover or interior cleaning. So if it has none of those, doesn't matter. They could still label it as a restored CGC clean book, and you would just get an A for an excellent job done. Book feels natural. So if your book still feels natural, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if it looks natural, doesn't matter if there's no fading, anything else. Book still feels natural. It still can be under their restored label if they believe that it is restored. So near perfect staple alignment or replaced exactly as they were. So if you take that cover off and you put the staples back perfectly in place, still wouldn't matter. They could still label it restored. So to me that says it doesn't even matter if you didn't take the cover off and the staples are perfectly aligned, we could still put it under that restored label. Filled edges cut to look natural and even. Clean staples are replaced with vintage staples. So you're replacing staples with staples from the same area. Our married cover pages match in size and page quality, professionally attached. I mean, do you see any differences in these levels here? I mean, it goes all the way from you're adding a complete foreign substance to this book to include things like if the book looks right and feels right and is 100% right, it still could be a CGC restored label. That is a problem for me when I'm telling people when they're sending their books who to send them to. Whenever people are asking what can be done to their books, like, this is a problem. It is a problem for two reasons. Again, they're not going to be able to catch everything. How do I know? Because they aren't catching everything. So that is a big problem with consistency. If I send 5 books in and all 5 books have been treated with the exact same level of treatment, and they catch 2 of them, and I say the word catch, and they notice and they flag 2 of them, that's 3 books that went through and didn't get caught at all. What I'm also starting to see now is false positives. Books that were not treated at all with anything that they would consider a restorative treatment, but they're coming back and saying, hey, these books are in too good of shape. And they have this to fall back on, saying, hey, there's no fading. We don't understand that it's not always going to result in these, but they're in too good of shape. We've deemed that they are restored books. And they're having to resubmit. And when you're talking about running a business, I mean, it's great if people are resubmitting the same book over and over and over and over again to get through to the right grader. But as a consumer, it's a hard place to be in. And talking about consumers, how is anybody else going to know that these books are cleaned? If I'm going to a trade show and I see a really nice looking copy of Hulk 181 up there, and I mean, this is just a pristine copy, looks like a solid 8.0. I'm going through, white pager all the way around. I buy this book, I send it in, it comes back, it's 8.0, purple label, pages lightened, covered clean. Based on what? Based on somebody's opinion sitting behind a table saying, I don't think that this could be this clean for being this age of book. That is a problem for consumers. That is a problem for a company who's putting their name on the line to sit there and say, hey, we can't prove it, but we feel strongly enough about it that we're going to do it, thus creating an entirely separate market for that comic book. You know, nobody who is buying an 8.0 Hulk 181 is buying a purple label one for the same price as they're buying a blue label one. And you can make the argument all you want that CGC doesn't pay attention to the secondary market. They absolutely do, because they charge you based on the secondary market's grading fees. You know, if that Hulk 181 comes back at 9.8 blue label, they're definitely going to upcharge you for the grading cost. So they're definitely in tune with the secondary market. Ultimately, what I'm here to say is I think they need to change their stance on it entirely. There is not anybody out there who cares about this stuff. And if you are, you're just trying to start an argument, and I can convince you with one argument and rebuttal. Like, if you go to buy a classic car, an all original classic car, and the individual is out there, you're not going to go walk up to him and be like, you've washed this car since 1960. I can tell there's no dirt on it. Did you polish the leather seats on the inside too? I can tell there's no holes or rot in the seats. No, because the dirt and the grime and the crud that gets on a comic book over the course of the years aren't original to the comic book. If a comic book is professionally stored, or if a comic book is properly stored in climate controlled conditions, it doesn't get tan lines, it doesn't brown like these other books that are just left out in the open do. Those are all things that come from misuse of, or mishandling of the books, and shouldn't be penalized for cleaning and treating those. A lot of the stuff that we do on these comic books when they're cleaning it, a lot of it is just to improve the appearance of the book. You know, talking about, you're not taking a 1.0 book and turning it into a 9.8 book. You're taking a 3.5 book that looks like trash, because it's just darkened to, it's almost a complete brown. It's got stains in it from, some kid spilling their juice box on it whenever they were a kid. And you're getting rid of that stuff so it looks and presents well. We've seen CGC change their stance in the past. Pressing, used to be looked down upon because you were improving the grade of the book. You were restoring, flat pages and flat covers back to the book. And CGC really realized no one cared. Because again, the wrinkles and the bends in the book, those aren't original to the book anyways. There's something that happened to it over the course of the years. Tape, You know, that's a huge one. You know, tape is really logistically adding something that doesn't belong on the comic book to preserve its structural integrity. But it was just so prevalent. CGC realized most people didn't care because it was so prevalent that they stopped docking it for Purple Label Restored on those individual books. I think CGC needs to come to agreement that this is not something that most collectors are going to care about. The vast majority of collectors, the people who are reaching out to me to work on their books, they want a book that looks nice. They want a book that looks like they did when they either bought it or when they owned it when they were kids, and it will display nicely on their wall. And they want it in a blue label with the CGC. That's what they're asking for, and I think that's where we're ultimately going to end up. I think that CGC is eventually going to come around to this idea that these treatments are within the parameters of what most collectors expect to happen to their collectibles. If I have an old toy that's, you know, got crud on it and I'm going to go sell it on eBay, I'm going to take a wet wipe and wipe it off before I post it on eBay, and no one is going to care. You know, we're on that same level of thinking, and I know there are going to be detractors, and I know there are going to be people who hate on these processes and will always say, you know, no restoration, no way, and it's fine. If you want to be a purist, I would ask you to find some definitive way to prove that the books have never had any of this stuff done to them, because you can't. There is no way. Like, the tells that they're using to qualify these books are tells that could be from a number of different things. There is no definitive blacklight treatment, no ultraviolet light, or anything you can shine over these books to tell definitively if anything has been done to them. All you're doing is you're empowering these people at CGC to come in and take an individual who spent their money to encapsulate, who spent their money to possibly have treated the book, to have it look as nice as it can and present as best they can on their wall, and for CGC to come in and say, hey, we believe that this book has had something done to it that we don't agree with currently under our universal label, and we're going to give it a purple label. Feel free to resubmit it to us, because there's a good chance we'll miss it the next time. And that is not a place that we can be. So my ask for all of you guys, if you agree with me or disagree with me, is leave me a comment down below what your thoughts are on it. Till next time though, guys, Hobby Hero, out.